Now, ICD-10-CM Chapter 2, Neoplasms, Code Series C00 through D49. How many of you had an opportunity to watch the TAP lecture? I know we got a lot of homework, but how many of you had time to view the TAP lecture? Go ahead, type in the chat. Good deal. One person said, hey, I did. I know it's a lot. Two people did. Somebody said, I didn't. It's okay. It's okay. But when you have an opportunity, please, you're gonna thank yourself for it. Someone said they did. It was very helpful. And they're so much better at reading the guidelines in the manual now. Case and point. Indeed. And if you're not ready, because you're kind of overwhelmed by what we're already requiring of you, just take your time and revisit it when you feel ready. So just so you know, when the TAP lectures are in Vimeo, they're also in your MCG manual. Yes. Huh. I thought I had a little, I thought I did. Oh, I do. I'll show you a little later. But they are in Vimeo. They're in your MCG manual. And if you can't find any video in the manual, just click the logo. When you click on that logo, all of the videos will populate, okay? But today, you should have watched the ICD-10-CM TAP Part 2. This is Part 2, Neoplasms, Chapter 2. And someone said, hey, it did them good. Now, let's continue our discussion. Your poll question asked you whether or not you knew that there were 6 classifications of neoplasms when coding, and you all knew that. So let's review. We have primary cancer or malignancy. This is where the cancer originates. We also have secondary cancer or malignancy. This secondary cancer results from the primary, and we call this metastasis, or it has metastasized. Also, we have in situ. This is a form of malignancy, but it's not always malignant. Just to let you know that it can be malignant or it may not be malignant, but this type of malignancy is confined to the site of origin without invading the neighboring tissue. So it's pretty much contained. Also, we have benign. This is not a malignancy, but these are abnormal, non-cancerous cells. We also have uncertain neoplasms. That means the provider can't determine the nature of the neoplasm, so they don't know if it's malignant or not. And finally, unspecified. There's insufficient information in the medical record to assign a specific code. These are the meanings of these classifications. And I just want to kind of drive home a little bit about the nature or the evolution of cancer. So in this this represents the prostate. And I'm going to try and show you how cancer evolves. I'm going to try. All right, so the first image represents normal cells found within the prostate gland. The second, this is where you see the normal cells begin to grow and multiply. And these are benign cells. They're not cancerous, so we're going to call them benign. But when those benign cells continue to grow and multiply, and they begin to damage other cells within the prostate gland, and these start becoming classified as malignancy, or they can be malignant, or they are, okay, in this exercise. And this is low-grade malignancy. Now, they become high grade when you have significant structural damage of that gland, and it's caused by these cells becoming aggressive. And look at the mutation. They've mutated into something that could look like a tumor, right? And at this stage, the cancer is aggressive and the patient is really sick. And if that isn't enough, the aggressive cancer cells begin to move to other parts of the body like bone, and this is what we call secondary cancer. Another word for secondary, metastasis, or the cancer has metastasized. So the first two images are benign cells. They're uncertain cells or unspecified cells. The next two represent primary cancer or in situ cancer. And then the last image represents secondary cancer. And I'm finished. And I'm going to let that marinate. Hopefully, it helps you as a coder understand how prostate or how cancer evolves, how normal cells evolve better. Now, let's get to our ICD-10-CM. Let's take a look at it. And let's just observe the columns in the neoplasms table. This neoplasms table is in the index. It's in the alphabetic index. It's after the guidelines. It's after the guidelines right there. And these 6 classifications are found at the top of the table. So the first column, all of the codes within the first column, cancer. All of the secondary cancer. And we also call this cancer mets or metastasized or secondary cancer. Then you have your cancer in situ, benign, uncertain, and unspecified behavior. And when your documentation specifies the type of cancer, that's where you get your code. Now let's talk a little more about this Neoplasms table. Well, the first thing, all cancers are not coded from this table. Not all cancers, but your malignancies pretty much are. The types of cancers that are not coded using this table are typically your omas, your sarcoma, lipoma. That's not necessarily a cancer, but it could be neoplasma. Also, adenoma, carcinoma. They are not from this chart or table, but where can you find it? Of course, you can find it in the alphabetic index. So you may say, well, don't we go to the alphabetic index first anyway, right? Not for neoplasms. You can go right to the neoplasms table and then verify in the tabular list. I'm going to say it again. You can go right to the neoplasms table, look up your code, then verify it in the tabular list. All right, coders, I'm saying a lot, and I want to know how you're doing. You doing good? People say they're doing great. Okay, another thing I want to tell you about these columns. The first three are cancerous. Cancer in situ can be cancerous or not. So we're going to put it in the cancerous section. And the last three are not cancerous. They're not considered cancerous. Now, let's go ahead and let's code together using this Neoplasms table. All right. A patient arrives to the oncologist to receive treatment for prostate cancer. All right, I got a question. Which cancer are we coding for? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? We only have one cancer, and that's prostate cancer. And this prostate cancer, it defaults to primary. When you're coding for the exam, if there's no mention that this is secondary cancer, the default is primary. All right, so let's go look up this code. All right, so the patient arrives for prostate cancer. So we know this is primary. So our code is we're gonna take our code from the first column, but I do want to point out that these cancers, these neoplasms, are arranged alphabetically. So you just pretty much look for your cancer in alphabetical order. So we're going to go down until we get to the P's and we find prostate cancer. CC1, C61, C79, D07, et cetera, But where we find our code, we just make sure we're in the correct column. We know this is primary, so we're going to look in the primary column, and you can see what the answer is. So we've seen that C61 is our code. Let's go ahead and verify. So when we look in the tabular list, C61, malignant neoplasm of prostate. And it tells you to use additional codes, if applicable, to identify the hormone sensitivity status. and rising PSA following treatment for malignant neoplasm of prostate. So this isn't applicable. Our documentation was very brief. Therefore, C61 is our answer. And that's how you look up a code. But I think you all know how to use this. At least some of you do, based on your answers. All right. Now you give it a try. A patient was diagnosed with primary cancer of the left bronchus with metastasis to the hip bone. The patient's treatment is for the secondary cancer. All right, this is what you need to do. You have to look up each cancer separately. Okay, coders, type in the chat. What are our two cancers? Good deal. All right, so if you want to, you all are just amazing. If you want to say which one is sequenced first, go right ahead. Okay, I don't want to go too slow. All right, so we have two cancers, the primary cancer of the left bronchus and the metastasis to the hip bone. So we have hip bone cancer as well. Now let's look up the first one. And if you want to write it down, you can just, kind of keep yourself organized on what we're coding. So we're going to look up the cancer, malignant neoplasms of the left bronchus, the primary cancer, right? So first things first, we're going to go to the neoplasms table. Yes, you can start there. And we're going to look under the B's for bronchus. And the column that we look under, it's primary. So the first column is where we'll find our code. So our answer is C34.9. Do we stop there? No. Always verify. Because remember, it gave us C34.9 and there was a dash and a check. So that meant that there were additional codes that you needed to verify for. So when we get to C34.9, we're at malignant neoplasm of unspecified part of the bronchus or lung. Now, which one is applicable? This is the left bronchus. So C34.92 malignant neoplasm of unspecified part of left bronchus or lung. All right, so we got our first code, right? So go ahead and write it down. Write down C34.92. Let's go back so you can see it. Now let's look up our second code, hip bone metastasis. How do you look that up, Mrs. J? Well, let's just call it what it is. It's malignant neoplasms of the bone, right? Which bone? The hip. All right. So you start in your neoplasms table. You look under bone, and underneath bone, you see these are indented slightly. You locate the bone, and it is hip. There you go. And since this is metastasis, this is our secondary cancer. And our code, C79.51. That is our answer. So let's go ahead. Let's look up C79.51. Let's verify it in the tabular list. C79.51, secondary, malignant neoplasm of the bone. And again, secondary means metastasis. All right. How are you doing, coders? Good deal. Someone said, I'm rocking, I'm great, outstanding. All right, so you should have written down your primary cancer of the left bronchus, and you should have written down the code for your hip bone. Now, guidelines. That's what this is about, guidelines. So we've got our codes, but we don't know which one to sequence first, right? Because we've got two cancers here. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. It says the patient's treatment is for the secondary cancer. So the secondary cancer is being treated. So this treatment of secondary site. Guideline C2.B. And if you look in this third column, it says, hey, you should sequence your secondary or your metastasis first, followed by the primary cancer. Because the success of coding for neoplasms is you always have to think about coding for what is being treated or the RFE. All right. So did everybody understand that guideline? Go ahead, type your answers in the chat. Okay, good deal. A few of you have responded that you do know it. So if you said C79.51 followed by C34.92, outstanding. Now, for today's discussion, we are going to focus on the guidelines. We are. It's imperative that you understand, the definitions and how to apply it. So my advice is to follow along in your MCG manual. You don't have to do it in class, but you can do it if you watch the playback, or you can do it in class too. Flip to ICD-10-CM Chapter 2 in your MCG manual and follow along. We're not going to go in exact order, but you'll be able to find the guidelines because we will number them. Also, if you have an ebook, open it up, type Control F, and then your headings on the left, right here, click it, and then your all of your chapters will populate, and you'll need to click on this one. Specific coding guidelines for Chapter 2, Neoplasms. And I did see someone asking about, how to get to the videos. You get to them from your MCG manual, your TAP videos. Now, let's begin our discussion of the neoplasm guidelines.
Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, happy coding!